Hook 0 to 15s. The offer letter came on a Tuesday. You read it 3 times. The salary was fine. The title was fine. Everything was fine. And then you closed the laptop and sat there in the dark feeling absolutely nothing. Not relief, not excitement, nothing. And the worst part? You couldn't tell anyone, because you just got the thing everyone tells you to want. Tension 15 to the 60s. There is something deeply strange happening in the job market right now that nobody is naming out loud. People are applying to hundreds of jobs, getting rejected automatically, being CC'd on their own rejection emails, having their resumes filtered out before a human ever reads them, spending 4 to 6 months in a cycle of silence, ghosting, and humiliation. And then, finally, they get the offer. And instead of joy, there's this hollow feeling, this strange grief. Like something has been taken away at the exact moment you were supposed to celebrate. Why does that happen? Because the process itself broke something, and we need to talk about that. Body. Let's go back to the beginning. When you start a job search, there's hope. Real hope. You update the resume, you write the cover letter with actual care, you think about what you want. There's a version of yourself you're imagining, a future self with a new office, new coworkers, a new chapter. That version of you feels possible. But here's what the modern hiring process does to that version of you. It erases it. Slowly. Application by application. Research from recruiting platforms in 2025 found that the average white-collar job posting receives over 400 applications within 48 hours. Many companies now use AI screening tools that reject 75% of applicants before any human sees their name. The average time between first application and first interview, if it happens at all, is 23 days. 23 days of silence for every single application. Now multiply that by 50 applications, or 100, or 200. What that does to your nervous system is not nothing. Psychologists call it learned helplessness. It's a concept first identified by Martin Seligman in the 1960s through experiments we'd never run today. The core finding was brutal and simple. When a living thing is subjected to repeated negative outcomes it cannot control or predict, it eventually stops trying. Even when an escape becomes available, it doesn't take it. It just sits there. And here's where it gets uncomfortable. Because learned helplessness doesn't disappear the moment the good thing finally happens. The nervous system doesn't just flip a switch. If you spent 4 months being told no, being ignored, being treated as a number in a queue, your body has adapted to that reality. It has built walls. It has lowered its expectations as a form of self-protection. So when the offer comes, the walls don't come down immediately. They stay up, because your brain doesn't yet trust that this is real, that it won't be taken away, that there isn't a catch, and that distrust feels like emptiness, like numbness, like grief for something you can't quite name. But there's another layer here, and this one is darker. During a long job search, something else happens. You start to negotiate with yourself. You lower the bar. You tell yourself that a job, any job, is the goal. That salary doesn't matter. That the commute is fine. That, yes, the Glassdoor reviews are concerning, but every company has problems. That you'll figure out the culture once you're inside. You make 100 small compromises in the dark, alone, just to keep yourself going. And by the time the offer arrives, you're not even sure anymore which version of you accepted it. Was it the hopeful version from month 1? Or the exhausted, beaten-down version from month 4 who just needed it to be over? That ambiguity is its own kind of grief. Here's something hiring managers rarely talk about. The candidate who accepts the offer after a 6-month search is almost never in the same psychological state as the candidate who applied on day 1. They are, in many ways, a different person, more cautious, more cynical, less willing to bet on themselves. less able to feel the texture of a win. And companies benefit from this, whether they intend to or not. An exhausted candidate negotiates less, asks fewer questions, takes the first number offered, is grateful in ways that a confident candidate would never be. The process doesn't just filter talent, it conditions people. Now here's the question I want you to sit with. What happens inside that job in the first 90 days? Because the grief of the offer doesn't disappear once you start. It comes with you. Research on new employee experience consistently shows that the first 3 months are the highest risk window for disengagement. And the candidates most likely to disengage early are the ones who arrived already depleted. They're not ungrateful. They're exhausted. There's a difference. But the workplace has no language for that distinction. The onboarding assumes you're excited. The team assumes you're fresh. Your manager assumes you're starting from zero. And you're sitting in the orientation wondering if you made a mistake while simultaneously knowing you had no real alternative. That tension is one of the least discussed psychological experiences in modern work life. And it's becoming more common, not less. LinkedIn has now placed limits on the number of easy apply submissions a person can make per month, meaning the platform built to connect job seekers and employers has essentially decided that job seekers are applying too much. Read that sentence again. The system punishes desperation while creating the conditions for desperation. Fidelity announced return-to-office mandates and layoffs in the same month. Cloudflare cut over 1,000 jobs globally this spring. Layoff trackers are showing the kind of numbers that were supposed to be pandemic-era anomalies. They're not anomalies anymore. This is the architecture of modern employment, and it is grinding people into a version of themselves that accepts the offer with hollow eyes and calls it a win. Climax. Here is the central insight. The grief you feel when you get the offer is not ingratitude. It is not a sign that something is wrong with you. It is a completely rational response to an irrational process. You were treated like a data point for months. You were conditioned to expect rejection. You made compromises in the dark that you've barely admitted to yourself. And now the system wants you to feel triumphant. But triumph requires a self that feels whole. And the hiring process, as it exists right now, does not leave people whole. What we're seeing is a mass psychological injury that has no official name, no cultural acknowledgement, and no institutional support. It lives in the gap between getting what you wanted and feeling what you expected to feel. And if you have felt this, you are not broken. You are paying attention. Ending. There's a version of this story where the ending is hopeful, where you take the job, give it time, find your footing, and the hollow feeling eventually fills in. That version is real. It happens. But there's another version where you spend the next 2 years in a job you accepted while numb, performing okayness, and never quite understanding why you can't bring yourself to care the way you used to. Both versions start at the same offer letter. The difference is whether you ever stop to name what happened to you in the in-between. The job market tells you that getting hired is the finish line, but for a lot of people right now, it's where the real psychological work begins. If you felt something while watching this, share it with someone who's been in the search. Not because you have an answer for them, but because being seen is sometimes the only thing that actually helps.